All right, guys, today I'm going to talk to you about walking down the road of compromise. You see, whenever we've been compromised, we've lost a position of advantage. We're trying to work toward a specific goal. We're running a race, we see the tape at the end, we're running as fast as we can, we're doing everything that we can, but something happens that trips us up. We may have lost this advantage because of just coincidence, or could be because of bad decision making. So let's talk about that. I've got a couple of examples that I think might serve this well. The first one is a story about a young 22-year-old woman named Mary Callaghan. She was an immigrant from Cove, Ireland, and she was sailing into the New York Harbor in 1929. And when she was within sight of the Statue of Liberty, she became all excited, quite jubilant, and happy at the prospect of becoming an American citizen. She became so happy, though, that she started to wave her arms and cheer, and when she did that, her purse fell out from underneath her arm and into the murky water, along with the $60 in the U.S. passport that she had in it. So this really put her in a compromising position. She had to go sit at Ellis Island for a while and wait on identification. This was no short, easy process. I've made a couple of other videos on Ellis Island that you probably ought to check out. One's called How to Know Who You Really Are, and the other is What Ellis Island Can Teach Us About Judging Others. You should check them out. But it wasn't necessarily easy. It's easier now than it used to be. But so she had to sit there and wait for identification. And a Secretary of Labor in Pittsburgh by the name of James John Davis had read about this and took compassion upon her. You see, he was an immigrant from Wales at the age of 8, and he understood her situation. And he commanded that her waves and her cheers be her passport. And so it worked, and they allowed her in. Now, having a passport doesn't mean you're automatically allowed citizenship. It just means you can get into Ellis Island, and then from there they will scrutinize you and then find out whether you should be allowed citizenship or not. But she eventually did become a citizen and got a job in Chicago. And so that's a nice little story about someone whose position was compromised, and she was able to recover because someone was compassionate and exemplified grace. And so I think that's a nice ending to a story about someone who lost their advantage. And so, but that's rare. Those don't always happen. The other illustration I have for you is it took place on November 22nd, 1963. This was the day that John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. Now, there's a lot of things that led to his death. He compromised his own position, and so did the Secret Service agents that were on detail there. Now, here's how this went down. You see, Adlai Stevenson told John F. Kennedy, "Don't come to Dallas." The conservative Texas back then, at least during the 1960s, did not take well to the Democrats, and he had been accosted while he was there, and he told Kennedy, "Do not come here. It is not safe for you." And Kennedy did not listen to him. Kennedy was also advised to have a protective bulletproof bubble over the canopy of the convertible and refused it. The Secret Service agents wanted to be a lot closer to him than what they were allowed. He didn't like the fact that he couldn't be as accessible to the public as he wanted to be. So he told them to stay a little bit away from him. He wanted to be more visible. And so that became a problem in and of itself. So you can see he actually compromised himself. He actually contributed to the possibilities of his assassination. So the other thing that led to this was that the Secret Service agents seriously compromised his position. This was kind of a well-known fact soon after it happened, but the government worked fast to cover this up. Here's what happened. 9 out of the 28 agents assigned to protective detail that day had been out drinking and partying the night before until about 3 o'clock in the morning. In fact, one individual, one agent, was reported to have been out drinking till 5 o'clock in the morning. And they were to be at their post at 8 o'clock. Now, there was already a shortage of men. They couldn't get enough warm bodies to cover detail here. But at this point, these men are either hungover or sleep deprived, and probably both. And so here's what happened. Witnesses said that they had seen the barrel of a gun pointing out of the 6th-story window of the Texas School Book Depository, but the agents never saw it. Why didn't they see it? Because they compromised themselves. You know, when you're hungover, when you're sleep deprived, you can't be as connected as you'd like to be. You can't be as vigilant or observant as you'd like to be. And so when the shots rang out, there was a lull in their reaction timing because they had compromised their position the night before. And if you think that's just my opinion, understand this, that the Secret Service agents who were on detail that day, and in the years that went by, let's say 20 years later, tearfully regretted what had happened. In fact, immediately after it took place, one of them wept in front of Jacqueline Kennedy, saying this was his fault. He should have been able to stop it. This was his fault. In the 1980s, Secret Service agents were interviewed, crying on camera, saying that this is what took place. That was because of them that he lost his life. Now, can we all know for a fact that John Kennedy would not have been killed that day? Well, no, we don't. We don't know. Because there is such a mishmash, a scamble of different things, different theories that are out there as to how many shooters there were. Was it really Lee Harvey Oswald? Was it everything that was reported by law enforcement or the Secret Service agents? We don't know. There's so much suspicion surrounding all of that. The facts are so skewed. We don't even know what the facts are anymore. But one thing's a fact that we know for sure. The security agents themselves know they were out drinking the night before. They had compromised their position. By the way, that's completely against Secret Service protocol. That would never happen nowadays. If you want to see how fast agents would act during a shooting now, go back and look at the footage of Reagan being shot by Hinckley. Then you'll see just how fast, how much it had changed. So here you have two different sets of people. One young woman who by happen chance compromised her position, but she was lucky enough that someone showed compassion on her, and she still got to where she wanted to go. And then you had Kennedy, who turned down advisement in his own favor and compromised his position. Then you had Secret Service agents who wanted to have, they just wanted to have a good time. Perhaps they were tired. They wanted to relieve some of the pressure, working double shifts, triple shifts, and they just wanted to have a drink. Even though Fort Worth was a dry city, they still wanted to have a drink. I lived in Grand Prairie for a couple years. It was a dry town, but there's still plenty of liquor to be found. But maybe that's all they wanted to do. I'm not judging that. But what I will say is that by their own admission, they compromised their position. Where do you fall in the scheme of all of this? Hopefully, you don't identify with any of it at all. But sooner or later, all of us are compromised. But we want to minimize our chances at loss. We want to minimize our chances at losing the advantage. You see? The best that we can do is make good decisions. The best that we can do is tend to our responsibilities. Be at our post. Be sober when we're there, figuratively and literally. And be responsible like that. Sometimes things just happen, like they happened to Mary Callaghan. They just happen. But don't live in regret. Don't live in sorrow. Don't live with that kind of pain. Because you can compromise a fantastic journey within a few mere seconds. That's all it takes. And many men, and I say men, I guess I should say mankind, many people have lost everything due to bad decisions in just a moment of time. Just a moment. It doesn't necessarily encompass their whole entire character, and that's what's hard to overcome. That's what's hard to convince people of, is that it's not a matter of your character. It was just a moment in time. But great loss was sustained. You might have lost your character. You might, well, not your character. You might have lost your reputation. You might have lost your position. You might have lost your happiness. But it doesn't have to be that way. Keep these things in mind. Be responsible. Always be learning. All right, guys, that's all I have for you today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something from it. Give it a thumbs up. Please share it with somebody else. Share it on your Facebook. However else you want to do it, please let people know about it and subscribe if you haven't done so already. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.